For more than 2 decades, Sean "Diddy" Combs threw the biggest parties in hip-hop, jet set with presidents, and built a billion-dollar brand that felt bulletproof. But in the dead of one December night, a terrified assistant, a loaded gun, and a frantic chase through the Hollywood hills ripped the glittering facade wide open. And the fallout is now unfolding in a New York courtroom. Today's story dives into that explosive moment and the alleged 20-year web of intimidation, hush money, and violence prosecutors say held it all together. Stick around because each witness is peeling back a layer that even Diddy's legendary swagger might not survive. Sean Combs turned a dorm room hustle into a pop culture empire. One minute he was an intern racing coffee up Harlem stairwells. The next he was Puff Daddy, stacking platinum plaques, launching Bad Boy Records, and rewriting the sound of the late 90s. By the mid-2000s, he'd morphed again, this time into a mogul with vodka brands, fashion lines, and a Forbes valuation flirting with $1 billion. To the outside world, he was the tireless optimist who coined "can't stop, won't stop" the life of every red rope afterparty, the king who never seemed to stumble. But the higher the climb, the darker the rumors. Assistants whispered about sudden explosions of rage behind studio doors. Security staff talked about cash envelopes to keep last night quiet. Industry insiders swapped stories of secret freak-off parties where phones were confiscated and NDAs handed out like wristbands. When longtime girlfriend Cassie Ventura filed a civil suit in 2023, alleging a decade of control, surveillance, and violence, many said it merely confirmed what employees had muttered for years. Still, none of those whispers slowed the music or the money until one December morning in 2011, when a frantic phone call and a drawn gun would expose just how fragile Diddy's kingdom really was. Capricorn Clark's very first shift should have been a victory lap. Promoted to global brand director at Bad Boy, chauffeured straight from JFK, ready to impress. Instead, she found herself in the backseat of a black SUV, rolling through Central Park after 9 p.m., flanked by a bodyguard built like a linebacker. Diddy, who she still called Puff, leaned in and murmured, "I hear you used to work for my rivals. If that ever becomes a problem, I'll toss you in the East River myself." Weeks later, $250,000 in diamond bling vanished from the tour vault. Clark was dragged to a deserted midtown skyscraper and strapped to a polygraph chair for 5 days straight. Each dawn, the examiner hissed the same warning: fail, and you're going for a swim. She passed, but the message was clear. Loyalty was life insurance. Then came December 2011. Puff pounded on her apartment door before sunrise, a pistol flashing in his hand. "Get dressed. We're going to finish Cudi." Terrified, Clark climbed into his Cadillac Escalade as he ranted about Kid Cudi dating Cassie. At Cudi's driveway, Puff and a bodyguard stormed inside while Clark, still captive, phoned Cassie. He's got a gun. He wants him unalived. Minutes later, Puff sped off, chasing Cudi's car through the canyon until police cruisers forced him to peel away. By dawn, Clark had witnessed a death threat, a break-in, and the prelude to a high-speed pursuit, all because her boss couldn't stand the idea of losing control. And she still had 14 more years on the payroll. December 2011 should have been quiet for Scott "Kid Cudi" Mess Cudi, new music on the way, a low-key romance with Cassie Ventura, and zero reason to fear a chart-topping rival. Then, just before dawn, his phone lit up. On the other end was Capricorn Clark, whispering that she'd been forced into Diddy's Escalade at gunpoint. "He's coming for you. Get out of the house," she warned. Moments later, Cudi heard his security alarm shriek as Combs and a bodyguard stormed through the front door. Police sirens broke the standoff, but the danger didn't fade. Prosecutors say Combs sped back down the canyon, vowing that everyone in the SUV had better convince Cudi it wasn't Puff, or face deadly consequences themselves. Clark's frantic call, now replayed in court, turned what might have been hip-hop gossip into a potential murder conspiracy. 3 weeks after that break-in, Cudi's brand new Porsche erupted in flames outside his New Jersey driveway, torched by what investigators believe was a Molotov cocktail dropped through a hole cut in the roof. In court last week, Cudi testified that when he confronted Combs months later, the mogul first denied involvement, then casually apologized if it felt personal. The defense insists there's no hard proof linking Combs to the fire, but jurors have now seen charred leather photos and heard about Diddy's earlier threat to blow up Cudi's ride if the rapper didn't back off Cassie. Yet the most brutal fallout of that night didn't hit Cudi at all. It landed on Cassie herself, and the eyewitness was standing just a few feet away. When Cassie Ventura met Sean Combs in 2006, she was a 19-year-old singer chasing a dream. What she found, she told jurors, was a partner who wrapped affection so tightly around her life that it became a leash. Phone calls monitored, friends screened, every movement logged by bodyguards who answered only to him. Over 11 years, the glamorous couple fronted magazines, yet behind closed doors, Cassie says fear was the constant soundtrack. That fear turned physical the night of the Kid Cudi break-in. Capricorn Clark testified she watched Combs kick Cassie with 100% force as the singer curled on the driveway in a silent, fetal ball, punishment for daring to date another man. Neither Clark nor the bodyguard moved. Both now admit they were frozen by the same threats Cassie lived with daily. The violence, prosecutors argue, was only part of a wider pattern. Cassie described drug-laced freak-off gatherings where hired male escorts, cameras, and cocktails of MDMA and ketamine blurred consent and memory. Recordings of those nights, she says, became blackmail currency. Step out of line, and the footage could surface. Former assistants and a male escort have echoed those claims, painting a picture of parties run with nightclub polish and cartel discipline. In November 2023, Cassie sued, alleging years of assault and coercion. Combs cut a $20 million settlement within 24 hours. Money that, she testified, felt like hush cash but couldn't buy back my time, my voice, or my peace. The suit cracked the dam. Within months, federal agents raided Combs' homes, seizing the very tapes Cassie feared. 4 days on the stand this May, her voice steady but her hands shaking, Cassie told jurors she stayed because she believed the cameras might one day protect her, only to realize they protected him. As she stepped down, the courtroom fell silent. Even Combs' high-priced lawyers looked rattled. Diddy's security detail was more small army than entourage. Ex-NFL linemen and off-duty cops who moved in tight formation, sealed hotel corridors, and, according to two former personal assistants, kept pistols on their laps whenever the boss felt threatened. One aide told jurors he once chauffeured Combs to a late-night diner standoff with Suge Knight, while 3 guns rested across the mogul's knees. Everyone in the SUV understood the unspoken rule: step in or speak up, and you might not step out. Intimidation wasn't limited to muscle. Capricorn Clark testified she spent 5 straight days strapped to a polygraph after $250,000 in diamonds vanished, each session ending with a warning she'd be thrown in the East River if the needle ever twitched the wrong way. She passed every test, she said, but the threat etched itself deeper than any lie detector spike. Silence carried a price tag or a payout. Prosecutors presented ledgers and text threads suggesting hush money flowed through shell companies, and witnesses described NDAs passed around like party favors. One Washington Post analysis counted at least 4 separate accusers who say Combs tried to buy their quiet, while Cassie's mother testified she accepted $30,000 to keep an assault out of court. Keeping the fantasy spotless also meant cleanup crews. Former aide George Kaplan told jurors he restocked medicine kits of MDMA, wiped down Bel Air hotel suites littered with baby oil bottles, and watched coworkers freeze as glassware shattered during airborne rages on Combs' private jet. He quit only after seeing Cassie screaming beneath a raised whiskey glass. Threats, polygraphs, payoffs, and pills, prosecutors call it a racketeering playbook, a corporate-sized system designed to ensure no one questioned the king. But every fortress has a weak point, and in March 2024, federal agents found one, smashing through mansion gates on both coasts in synchronized dawn raids. Just before sunrise on March 25, 2024, Homeland Security armored trucks rolled up to 2 very different pieces of real estate: Sean Combs' glass-walled Holmby Hills Palace in Los Angeles and his $35 million Star Island spread in Miami. Neighbors heard bullhorns, saw red dot lasers dancing across the driveway, and watched Combs' 2 adult sons emerge with their hands in the air. Inside, agents ripped open safes, yanked surveillance drives from the walls, and left rooms ankle-deep in scattered files after disabling the mansion's security system. By the time the sun was fully up, the inventory read like a dystopian catalog: disassembled AR-15 parts, a loaded .45 hidden in a guesthouse suitcase, a Gucci bag of MDMA tablets, white powder that field-tested for cocaine and ketamine, and more than 20 bottles of lubricant and baby oil stacked in a hallway closet. Homeland Security agent Gerard Gannon told jurors the hall looked less like a bedroom and more like a prop room for a very dark movie. The sweep reached beyond the front gates. At Miami International Airport, longtime aide Brendan Paul, described in one lawsuit as Combs' drug mule, was arrested carrying cocaine-laced candy, timed to the exact minute the home raids began. Legal analysts now warn that if Combs is convicted, the same properties that once symbolized his empire could be seized under federal forfeiture rules. And the raids cracked the vault of silence. Within weeks, former chauffeurs, private jet pilots, a male escort, and even Cassie Ventura's mother volunteered stories of violence and hush money. Prosecutors raced to add their names to a witness list that has already topped 16 in just 2 weeks of trial testimony. Combs was arrested that September and now sits in a Manhattan courtroom listening as every seized hard drive, every shell corporation, and every shaken ex-employee edges the case from rumor to hard evidence. Mark Agnifilo's job is simple in theory: convince 12 jurors that every witness on the government's list has a motive, a memory gap, or a money trail. He starts with Capricorn Clark, pouncing on the detail that after the 2024 Homeland Security raids, she actually asked to come back as Diddy's chief of staff, a request Combs refused. If you feared him so deeply, Agnifilo asks, why beg for the job? Clark concedes she did, in part, she says, to keep him from spiraling. Next, he hammers at foggy recollections. Clark can't recall the exact street where the December 2011 high-speed chase began, nor which hand Combs held the pistol in. Agnifilo reads her prior FBI statement aloud, pointing out tiny deviations. Then he reminds jurors that the 5-day lie detector marathon she described took place 14 years ago. Memories bend, he tells them, but the law doesn't. Cassie Ventura gets the same treatment. Defense attorneys project affectionate texts from 2010 where she gushes that she's always ready for a freak-off and professes love. They show 2018 messages where she jokes with Combs about his rumored yoga instructor fling. The aim is clear: present Cassie as a willing partner who only cried foul when the relationship and the money ended. A forensic memory expert follows, explaining how trauma, media coverage, and prosecutor prep sessions can rewrite recollections over time. The expert never calls Cassie or Clark liars. He merely plants the seed that emotional testimony can be sincerely believed and still wrong on the facts. Finally, Agnifilo moves to suppress the flashiest allegations. He files motions to strike Kid Cudi's Porsche fire, bar mention of NDAs that aren't in evidence, and block prosecutors from saying ecstasy unless they can prove the pills weren't prescription. Some motions stick, most don't, but each one lets the defense repeat its mantra: sensational doesn't equal substantiated. Even so, the strategy is risky. Every time the defense spotlights a salacious text or fuzzy memory, prosecutors counter with a ledger, a raid photo, or another shell company wire. And with more witnesses waiting, including 2 former bodyguards who took those hush money envelopes, the jury may decide there are simply too many cracks to patch. In a matter of weeks, 12 ordinary New Yorkers will decide whether Sean Diddy Combs was simply a relentless businessman or the architect of a 2-decade fear machine. A guilty verdict could hand him 15 to life and vaporize an empire that once spanned vodka, fashion, and television. An acquittal might let the brand limp on, but the flood of testimony has already rewritten his legacy. No matter the outcome, the party king image has cracked, and the world has seen what hid behind the velvet rope. Yet this story stretches beyond one superstar. If jurors convict, hip-hop will face an unprecedented reckoning. Can an industry built on larger-than-life personas police its own power brokers? If they acquit, the chilling message to victims could be that fame still buys silence. Either way, the verdict will echo through boardrooms, recording studios, and courtrooms alike. So, as the jury files out and the cameras fade, one question will linger. Was this the final beat in Diddy's decades-long anthem, or just the first note in a new era of accountability? Keep watching, because the next headlines may change the soundtrack of pop culture forever.